Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gettin Buzz'd. I'm Dustin Brackett, CEO and founder of HIVE Digital Strategy, and I got a gang with me today. So we're going to be talking about INBOUND 2020. It's HubSpot's big inbound marketing conference, and it was a little weird this year. So we had to move everything online when normally it's us and our closest 25,000 friends in Boston. But with me today, I've got Michael Thebeau, our business development manager.
Finger guns.
Melanie Locke, she's a copywriter and developer. Zach Lemmer, an account manager, and Yvonne Hall, our senior account manager.
Hello.
So we're going to kind of talk through what we learned from Inbound, how we adjusted and how HubSpot adjusted to the online format and what we thought of that. And kind of our biggest takeaways and things that we want to implement ourselves or we think would be great for clients or even just any of you watching. So like I had mentioned,
Are we not talking about what we're drinking today, our little buzz?
Oh, yeah, I don't feel like we're getting buzzed today.
Wow.
I mean, I guess I'm getting a little caffeine buzz, so I'm just drinking some coffee.
I thought the CEO was going to send us all beer or something like that. So maybe it's poor organization on his part.
It's in the mail.
But yeah, I'm going to be drinking water from my Uray Brewing water bottle.
Oh, that's good branding.
Yeah.
What are you doing,
Uray
Zach?
Brewing. I'm sure you're looking at this.
I've got a nice glass of H2O. I'm a water homie, so I like to stay hydrated.
I'm a water homie.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to have to cut that part out.
Team
This is off to a
caffeine.
great start.
Just team caffeine it.
And he's gone.
We've lost him. Water homie out.
But so as we kind of dive into what Inbound was this year, like I said, this I think is most of our fifth. Okay, it's my fifth Inbound.
Let's talk about that. Zach, how many inbounds is this for you? Okay.
Second one. So I think
3
Melanie's the only one that doesn't have experience with the in-person, but it was a pretty big shift. Like I had mentioned, it's typically in Boston, and the way that it was run before is we had a partner day before that was for, I think, Gold and Up Solutions partners. That was on like Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday was the full conference and kind of open to everyone. Like I said, it's like 25,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
It's a big deal out in Boston, and they had the cool food trucks, which is one of the things I miss the most.
That's literally one of my lines that I wrote down to prep for this podcast.
No food truck.
Glad we're on the same page. Yeah.
But I think that, making that shift, and obviously it's something that HubSpot plans inbound like way in advance, right? As soon as one ends, like they have a whole team
They're
that's
planning
starting
now.
Yeah, the next one. And to make that shift from, I think Inbound was changed virtual in like May, to it actually going live in September is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I thought the experience was actually really well done. From the login in your homepage and creating your profile, and really them still trying to make it like an interactive experience. But it still was virtual. Yeah. What did you guys think of it?
I thought the platform they used was great. And I also was really impressed that they pivoted that quickly. I was super impressed.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed that I couldn't, pack up all the swag and take that home with me. So.
That's true.
No new stress
That's
balls.
true. There were no vendor booths to go look at.
Yeah, I think, I'd echo what you said, Dustin. I thought they did a great job with the user experience and the website and the different virtual stages kind of still made you feel like you were going different places. At first, when I created like my own profile and added a picture and stuff like that, I was like, I wonder how, from a sales perspective, like this is going to work networking wise, and like if I'll be able to have better communication. And maybe I wasn't using the platform well, but that originally kind of excited me. And as some of these conferences probably move virtually, I think there will be a better way to adopt that or kind of get into that. I think being in person is kind of invaluable, right? The energy is so contagious. The networking is great. And like you said, like going out to the food lawn and having 45 food trucks to choose from, like that's my favorite part of the entire day. One thing I thought was great was people feel comfortable and less vulnerable asking questions online. And so I thought the way they set things up, like I've been in sessions in person at, in Boston, where a session will end, they'll say, all right, we left 10, 15 minutes for questions. Who's got questions? Nobody walks up to the microphone. Nobody raises their hand. It's just kind of like a dead silence. And we get out 15 minutes early. But the Q&As on these ran until the very last minute. Like people had questions going from the minute that speaker started talking. And then they'd hop on the microphone when their talk ended, and they'd have 30 minutes to just answer questions. And they couldn't even get to all of them. They were just running through questions. So I thought that piece of the virtual experience was phenomenal.
That's true. I mean, basically every session, they had a live Q&A, and they're like, okay, well, I've got to prioritize because I've got too many questions, which was really cool. Right. You're right. I mean, I've been in those sessions too that like, okay, we've left time for questions, and everyone just kind of sits there or starts leaving the room. And, I think the fear of, oh, well, is this a dumb question is gone when it's virtual.
Right.
Another interesting thing I actually really liked that they did with the Q&As was that you could upvote people's questions as well.
Yeah.
And just given the vast amount of questions that they had in every Q&A of the sessions that I attended, it was really cool to be able to look through them and say, oh, this is the question that I really want to hear an answer to. So I'd upvote that one and maybe this one. And then you kind of do get the most important questions answered.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great aspect. I agree, Melanie.
Yeah, and I think like looking at it from the other side, I think Michael had a great point that I think just virtual conferences versus in person, like the energy is just not quite the same. I think that one of the big things for Inbound for me is like, I don't necessarily go to Inbound and I have like some earth shattering epiphany, right? Like nobody's, recreating the wheel. Like there's typically like a few things that I'm like, oh, that was a good idea. I want to implement that or whatever. But I think for me, the biggest thing is like the energy and the excitement about it. And it just kind of fuels the rest of the year that you're like, pumped to get back to work and to get implementing some of these things. And I think it's also just kind of difficult virtually because, there's the energy's not the same. Like, HubSpot, I thought did a good job of like promoting it and like, hey, we have these cool speakers and we have, this really cool online experience, but I don't know that it can ever like replace the energy of 25,000 people.
Absolutely. And I think that goes to like when I told my family that I was waking up at 4:00 Mountain Time to get on a virtual session, they thought I was crazy. And then I explained, well, if we were in Boston, I'd be getting up at 4:00 Mountain Time.
Yeah,
right.
We were probably stopping by a super cool coffee house on the way into the conference center. But I think that, I understand that aspect, and I definitely wanted to get up and attend those sessions, but then you didn't have that in-person contagious excitement to keep you pumped throughout the day. So I was definitely dragging a little in the afternoon with the virtual scenario.
Yeah, I definitely, and I just like in Boston, like at Inbound, like I packed my schedule, right? Like it was like session. But there were a couple times, and just like in Boston, like you just kind of get burnt out. And so there were definitely a couple times where it was like, okay, I'm going to Starbucks. I'm skipping that session because like I need a pick me up, right?
Right.
And it was interesting. Like there's a HubSpot Solutions Partners Facebook group, and like people were posting about Inbound and all of that. And one lady posted, and it like totally resonated with me. And she said, I always thought that like going to Inbound was exhausting because you're walking around to all these sessions, and like you're doing all this stuff. And she's like, I'm just as exhausted sitting at my computer. Like, I think it's like a mental exhaustion, just like trying to take in so much information and just constantly listening
Right.
that, you know, I had the same experience that I was just like, oh, this will be easy, right? Like, you know, I'm just
Right.
watching some webinars and taking a few notes and things, and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that's kind of I mean, I've never been to the in-person ones, so I don't know really how it's different, but I do think that was my favorite part about Inbound, was just kind of the inspiration you get from listening to so many cool people talk. And yeah. I mean, looking back, I had little snippets of things that I remember, but I mean, I don't remember like really who some of the speakers were or all the detailed information, but I did feel just this energy of listening to all these people all day and taking these ideas and thinking about them and how we could use them for clients or for Hive or just general cool marketing ideas.
Right.
And I liked that was still a part of it, that I could still have that kind of experience, even if it was online and different than I guess it normally is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that even back to that, like, in-person experience, I think they tried to make the meetup thing work. I didn't have a good experience with it. That, you know, they were trying to connect people and, you know, have conversations and things like that. And it just, for me, it fell flat. You know, it just didn't feel like there was as much interaction or people interested in doing that. And, you know, who knows, there's probably plenty of people in their PJs all day, like just watching these, you know, knowing that they're not going to be on camera. So they're like, no, I'm not going to that. Whereas in Inbound, like, you're talking to people in between sessions and at lunch and going to happy hours and like all these different like networking opportunities that just kind of weren't there for me. And I went to a couple meetups and it just didn't work for me.
I only went to one, but it definitely did not work.
That's where I had the most technical difficulties. I feel like across the board, they did a pretty great job of transitioning a giant in-person event to be something entirely online. But the meetups were really, I went to one and just continued to have technical problems. And eventually I was like, this isn't even worth my time. And that was frustrating.
Yeah. And I think they did do a good job, like you mentioned, from a technical standpoint. You know, I remember watching the first few sessions and I'm like, man, that was like seamless. Like, how did they do a live webinar so well? And it wasn't until like my third or fourth one that like they would have their presentation and then it would go to like an inbound screen and then they would come back and do the live Q&A. And I was like, wait, that guy's wearing a different shirt.
Right.
And, you know, then it was like, oh, they pre-recorded all of this. Like, that makes sense. I thought that was really interesting and really cool that it was a live conference and you couldn't get to it until their time. And only like during that span, right?
Right.
But they pre-recorded all of the presentations. So there weren't the ugly issues of like, can everyone see my screen? Like, can you guys hear me? You know, like there was none of that. And so like, I thought that was great that the presentations were so seamless. And then they actually had the live component of bringing the person back and saying, okay, now we'll have live Q&A during the second half or whatever. I thought that was really cool.
I agree. And I think it was done well from a technical perspective as well. I was in a couple of sessions where the video didn't play or there was some issues. And it also seemed like there was an inbound staff person identified in the chat as an inbound staff person that was keeping everyone updated. And if anyone in the chat was mentioning that they were having issues, that person was on it immediately, trying to talk them through those issues. And I thought that was really great that they had the capability and the staff to do that.
I mean, HubSpot's got a few employees.
Well, one or two. But they all were well-versed on this platform.
Right. Well, I think we expected that, right? Like that's what we've come to expect from HubSpot, that like they're never going to do anything like half-assed, right? Like it's going to be well-produced. And I thought taking such a big conference fully virtually that quickly, like they did a phenomenal job. I was super impressed.
I have no idea how Brian and Dharmesh still knocked it out of the park. while being in a park. I'm not sure, but I was still super impressed and inspired and got huge information takeaways from their session, which was great.
Yeah, I agree. So that kind of leads into like, you know, what were some of your biggest takeaways during the conference? Like, was there anything that, you know, really sticks out in your head, or like, oh, that was a great idea, or that was a cool tool, or anything like that?
My favorite takeaway was workflows and how you can utilize those better. I definitely got a kick out of just in general, like those types of sessions where they go into the HubSpot tool and kind of show you like maybe different ways that you hadn't considered using the tool. But for the workflows specifically, they were talking about setting up like a choose your own adventure workflow where you send an email and it's like, are you interested in this or this? And then depending on which CTA they click, they're entered into a different workflow that nurtures them down that path. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that that is a great idea for our clients who don't necessarily have personas identified, to help determine what that particular person should be connected to as the persona in the database. But those seem really fun to build out as well.
Yeah, and I think that like there are a lot of businesses that kind of come into HubSpot and they're like, well, we just have these lists of people, like don't know anything about them, right? And so I think that's a cool way to identify who cares about what. And, you know, I don't think by a single CTA click that you're going to know who that person is or who that persona is just yet, but I think it's a big step in the right direction.
Absolutely. I really liked the inbound debates. The one that I participated in was gated versus ungated, and I was interested in what they were going to cover. And I think the big takeaway, which was a theme that I got across all the sessions that I attended, is that you really need a mix. And that's why there is both. And you need to determine, based on goals, based on data, which one is right for that persona, that buyer stage. So it really just kind of reinforced that it all works together. But I do like the inbound debate styles and definitely want to see that happen when we return in person.
I thought that was cool too, that like it was treated like an actual debate. Like you have 3 minutes, go. You know, it wasn't, I expected, I was in that same one. I expected to just be like them talking back and forth. Well, what if, and you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, they're like actually debating. This is kind of cool. And they had opening remarks, and then they had, okay, you have 3 minutes for rebuttal, and like that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite session, and it's the one I was most excited about as well, was also a debate. And it was inbound versus outbound. And you know, we're an inbound agency. I was like, oh, I'm going to lean so heavily towards the inbound person, but I'm excited to see. And I thought the outbound person made a ton of great points and stuff like that. But I think, you know, the big thing that I came out of that session with was that, you know, it's marketing shouldn't be so secluded. It shouldn't be, hey, you really have to do inbound, and inbound's the only thing that works, or hey, you really have to do outbound. That's the only thing that works. What we need to focus on is our customers and meeting them where they are. George B. Thomas from Impulse Creative, he's one of my favorite speakers ever. But he brought up this example of like, you know, a form shouldn't be about lead generation. And, you know, raise my hand, I'm guilty of it. I always think of, oh, this person filled out a form, that's a lead, I'm going to call them, I'm going to close them, right? And from a sales perspective, that's what I always think about. But a form shouldn't be about lead generation. It should be about conversation generation, which really stood out to me, just thinking of them as a human with a problem that we need to solve, and talking to them not just like oh, you're interested in us, let me sell you stuff, but like really getting to know, okay, why did you fill out this form? What are your problems? Are we the right agency for you? Can we solve those problems? Can we solve it efficiently? And if so, then great. And I think coming from that approach, right, will help any business grow better, right? We can't just look at these digital downloads or form fills or anything like that as just a lead, but rather a human or a company with a problem and figuring out if we can solve them.
I half expected like the like HubSpot music to play just then, and then like it was gonna like turn into Grow Better, like it was a commercial. Yeah. You know, that I think that's a great point though. Like thinking about the conversation and the user, not just the lead, right? Like that's a really cool point and a shift I think we have to make as a society, right? As businesses, we have to make that shift of like, how do we start a conversation, not how do I get you in my funnel?
Right.
Right. Totally.
I had pretty much the same takeaway from very different sessions. Throughout a couple of the sessions that I went to, it seemed like the focus was on customers and thinking of customers as people and thinking of people in terms of connection. And I went to a couple sessions. One was called An Anthropologist Walks into a Bank, which was an excellent name. And it was just all about creating a customer experience that really focuses on the customer and what the customer wants rather than what we as business people or marketers or salespeople think the customer wants. And then I wound up getting the same exact message from a Ask Me Anything session that was all about A/B testing and conversions, which I didn't really think that was going to be my takeaway there. But the speaker did a great job of talking about all of these things that you're testing, all of these optimizations you're making on your website. You're doing them so that you're making it easier for the user. You're making it easier for your customer to interact with you online, to connect with you online, and to hopefully solve their problem online.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
That's a great
Yeah,
point.
for sure. You know, I think mine, I had several. One, I think account-based marketing is something that we want to be doing more of and kind of diving more in there. So I went to a session with Rollworks, which is a newer platform for ABM. And it, you know, I think that there's the misconception of like ABM is only for enterprise level businesses, right? Because it's expensive and it takes a lot of time and all of these things. But the session was all about like how it can work for small businesses and medium-sized businesses and enterprise businesses. And I thought that was really cool of like, hey, like this doesn't have to just be a solution that, you know, the Fortune 100 can have.
Mm-hmm.
I also, like, I always have takeaways as far as like HubSpot and tools that they roll out and information that they put out there. And there were a couple that I thought were really big. The first one being the CRM has always been kind of an issue for really big businesses or businesses that have a lot of contacts, even if they don't want to like market to all of them. And so they're rolling out the CRM with up to 1 million contacts, but you only have to pay for like, so if you have like, the CRM is always free for unlimited contacts, right? But if you have like the Marketing Hub or Sales Hub or Service Hub or any of those things, you end up paying per contact, right? But with their new update, you can have up to 1 million contacts in there, but you only have to pay for the contacts you actually market to. So you can still manage your full database. You don't have to have these like segmented, like, oh, we have the contacts we're not marketing to in, you know, this random database, but the ones that we are, they're in HubSpot, and so you have these like disconnected systems. Now they can all be in HubSpot, and you still just market to who you want to market to, and those are the ones that count towards your tier. So I thought that was really, really cool. And I think that's something that impacts a lot of businesses right away.
Absolutely, especially from a data perspective. I mean, when you have them all in those different databases, the biggest issue that we always hear is, well, we can't collect data across the entire database or between different life cycle stages. And I know that this is going to be a great solution for that we can then see from the beginning until the end. And then even through retention, we can see the data through all of that. I think it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of those contacts that these companies kind of have in that like no marketing database, right? It's not that like, oh, we don't want to talk to them. It's that they're not maybe like a fit right now. They're not engaged with us, whatever. But having them all in your HubSpot database, like if somebody does raise their hand and they start to engage with you, right, then you can market to them, and then they get into that piece. Where is if they're, you know, in that other database, like you probably don't have that option.
Right. Agreed.
And then the other like big thing, you know, there was a lot of enterprise level opportunities that kind of came out of it. The other one was custom objects that I think is huge, like giant game changer for big business. And so in HubSpot, like you've always been able to track like contacts and companies and deals and things like that. But with custom objects that they're rolling out for enterprise, now you can track anything, right? You can, if you do real estate, you can track your real estate listings and everything associated with them. You can track your events, like you can track your product SKUs, like all of these things you can now do in HubSpot. And I think that's one of the biggest product updates that HubSpot's ever done.
Yeah.
I think like it just opens up HubSpot to a whole new world of potential businesses that could be using HubSpot that weren't before because the capabilities weren't there.
Right. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that, but I think it's cool.
I think it's really exciting, and I can't wait to like dive in with some of our clients and start building those things out, because it's like it really does make HubSpot completely flexible. Like it doesn't matter what industry you're in, the size of your company, what you're tracking, what you sell, what you do, doesn't matter. It can work in there. So I thought that was really exciting. And then, you know, Michael, you mentioned George B. Thomas is like one of your favorite speakers. One of mine is Marcus Sheridan. And so I attended his session. He's with Impact. And he also has like 19 pool businesses, like swimming pool businesses. And I've seen him speak several times, and a lot of his messaging is consistent from session to session each year. It all like resonates really well. But one thing that he kind of changed this session was talking about we need to get away from blogs and get into learning centers. And kind of what he meant by that was you still need to be blogging, like that's still important, but give your prospects and clients and users a hub to learn, right? So that could include podcasts and like webinars and videos and downloads and blog posts and like all these different tools that they can consume in one place, so they don't have to, you know, search everywhere for it. And, you know, you just have a hub that they can go to, find the answer to what they're looking for, learn about what you do, learn about what their issues are. And I thought that was a cool idea. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses can also benefit from. And I think it creates a great user experience.
That's what I was going to say as well, is that really just brings back what Michael and Melanie had said earlier about it's about the human, it's about the experience, it's about the customer experience, the user experience. And that really speaks to that aspect as well, of making sure that if you're going to be a resource, that your resources are easily organized for someone to just dig in and consume and learn everything that they need to learn about it. And then, of course, calling it a learning center where people can learn. Marcus is just brilliant with things like that. So love that.
And I think it's a cool idea, just because you think about the purpose of blogging for a business. I mean, of course, you're trying to help your SEO, you're trying to provide education to your customers, but you're also trying to establish yourself kind of as a thought leader. And that really ties in with the idea of a learning center. Like you have this knowledge that you can offer to your customers, to your clients, to whoever, and sort of positioning it as a learning center makes that really clear. And I think also kind of backs up that the knowledge that you have to offer, the blogs, the podcasts, whatever content you're creating, is backing that up. You're offering something valuable and making it accessible to the user.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. That, you know, I don't know that enough businesses take that approach or understand that, like, the educational content you're putting out establishes authority. Like, that's one of the biggest reasons to do it, is that people want to know, one, that you know what you're talking about, right? But two, that you know enough to help them. And so, you know, putting out great content and having it all available there, because if somebody just happens to, like, search for something, they find one of your blog posts, if that's all they look at, that one blog post, like, you know, then they don't really know the extent of your knowledge or authority.
Expertise, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think those are all great points. And I think the conference overall, I think HubSpot has to look at it as a huge success. Hopefully it does not such a big success that they're like, we're doing them all online because we want to be back in Boston. I think that, you know, that's one thing. Like, through the whole conference, it was exciting, and I'm, you know, excited that they were able to do this, and it was a good experience. But the whole time I was just like, dang, I wish we were there though.
Yeah.
You know, but also from a speaker standpoint, like, one thing that I like, as we were watching the sessions, like, it would show like how many people are watching, right? Like, how many people are in the sessions. And I was kind of blown away by that.
Same.
Cause, like, you know, the big stages, you know, where Brian and Dharmesh would speak, or where, you know, Michelle Obama was a few years ago, things like that. Like, that's in like a giant auditorium, and it seats like 10,000 people or something like that, maybe more than that. And, you know, you expect that for a Michelle Obama, or, you know, big speakers like that. But even some of the, like, smaller sessions that I was in, you know, looking at that number, and I think, like, Marcus Sheridan, like, he's never been like a keynote at Inbound. He's always had sessions, but, like, I think his session had like 8,000 people in it. And that's something that, like, you just can't do logistically in person, because there's not a room for that, right? Like, to fit 8,000 people to come to this, you know, hour-long session. So I thought that was really cool, especially for those speakers, like, to have an audience size that there's no way they would have had previously.
I think the smallest session that I was in had 700 people in it. And there were sessions that I went to in person that had like 40 or 50 people. So even in that aspect, like, 700 is phenomenal. And what a great experience.
For sure. Yeah. And I think another thing that was really cool is that, like, you know, even if you weren't that well known of a speaker, or your company wasn't that well known, like, people were still attending. And, like, those numbers, like you said, even the smallest ones were big. And you probably don't have the same attention percentage as you do, like, in person. I think when people are in person, they're paying attention to you. Whereas, you know, it's easy to be checking your email, or, you know, working on something else while that's playing, but still, like, the audience is a big deal.
Absolutely.
Well, I thought they did a good job with the engagement still, just keeping track of the comments and upvoting the best ones. I was like, I'm going to keep this running in the background. I'll pay attention, but I'll be checking emails or sending out sales stuff or whatever. And I was like, what are people saying about this? Did they hear the same thing I heard? So I think they did a great job of kind of keeping people engaged as well as they could from their living room in their pajamas. So
absolutely. Great. I think it was cool. I'm excited to be back in Boston, hopefully in August next year. But
September.
You know, what?
It's in September next year, right?
Is it? Oh,
I think
don't know.
so. And I think that page said that it was a hybrid model, like first or second week of September, like right after Labor Day, I believe.
Okay.
Fall color.
So Yvonne's paying attention.
In New England.
I mean,
well.
It's much better than the year we went, and it was in November, and we were freezing.
Glad they're not doing that again.
Well, cool. Guys, thanks for joining. You know, obviously we're still doing this, like, remote COVID thing, but, you know, I think it was cool that we were all able to kind of engage with it, learn something, even though we couldn't have the, you know, in-person Boston experience.
The team building.
New normal.
The new normal.
Oh,
I was
Hopefully
hoping we were
not.
going to get through 1 minute of our lives without hearing new normal, but
you ruined
You
it
know,
for us.
thank-
Well,
yeah,
the
way to
new
go, Zach.
normal is hearing new normal.
Right.
The
Yeah.
water homie says the
Yeah.
new normal.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any questions about Inbound or any of the sessions or any of the things that we kind of learned from it, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll have our contact information below. And make sure to like and subscribe. We'll have a new podcast coming up in a couple weeks. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.